right screen this time. Not that easy.
Okay, I think we're good now. So, hey, everybody. This is David True. We're back. I hope you had a good break, and I hope you enjoyed the morning part of the morning panelists. So now we're moving into the later session, the second session. And it is a topic that is near and dear to me. Fraud, as I alluded to earlier at the end of Amna's session, is becoming more and more prevalent. Once we get into a digital world, fraud just increases. So we did a job over the last decade with chip cards and such at reducing payment fraud through that, but now we've had a great acceleration into digital, and that makes fraud all the easier. And one of the big problems about fraud is there's multiple ones, but there are multiple parties who want to reduce it. However, one does not want to, particularly if you're a merchant, but if you're anybody, an issuing bank, one does not want to make the fraud prevention tool so complicated that the consumer, you or me, who's trying to buy something, does not want to complete the transaction. So that's always the issue, friction. How does one reduce friction while also increasing fraud prevention? So NetHone is a company that thinks about that a lot. That's what they're all about. And Patrick Drexler, who is head of business development at NetHone, is going to be speaking about that with us in the next couple of minutes. He has, prior to doing this, he was a partnership department at PaySafeCard, so he's been in payments for a while. And he's been building, and for the last 5 years, he's been building a partnership department at Dalenis, I think I said that right, Nexus Payments in France, and leading group sales activities in other parts of the EU. So, Patrick, I thank you for taking a little time this morning to talk to us about how does one reduce fraud without increasing friction to the extent that transactions drop off.
Thank you very much, David, for the introduction. Just one quick question. Am I sharing the right screen?
Yes, I do see it.
Yeah.
You have glasses on, but other than that, it looks fine.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so yeah, welcome everyone to my session. Again, my name is Patrick Drexler, and I'm head of business development at NetHone. I've just earlier this year joined NetHone, and as David already mentioned, I've been working in payments for the past 10 years. So my presentation will be a little bit about fraud and payment, but it is obviously connected at many points. So so I'm talking about friction today, how you balance the friction, meaning how can you convert enough customers while still staying safe. So let me start my presentation with an example. Imagine Oprah Winfrey visited your online store, and your fraud detection system would consider Oprah a fraudster. Oprah would pack her things, leave your store, and leave together with her $2 billion US. Now, this is actually a real case. It wasn't an online store in that particular case, but a few years back in Switzerland, Oprah Winfrey, I'm not sure if you are familiar with the story, but Oprah Winfrey was visiting a boutique in Switzerland, and she wanted to buy a very expensive handbag. And the lady working in this boutique didn't want to hand that handbag to Oprah Winfrey because she said it was too expensive for her. And therefore, Oprah left the store and didn't buy anything, obviously. So what do I want to say with this example? In an ideal world, customers would have frictionless access to your goods and services, irregardless of the channel that they're using, whether they come via web, native, whether they're using a voice assistant. They would have their payment details stored within accounts so that they don't need to manually provide them again each and every time they visit your store. Customers would stay with you because they like the experience and are comfortable using your services. You would passively guard those consumers and users, not to give them the feeling that you are trying to invade their privacy, especially for EU citizens. This is a very sensitive topic. And even if your customer's account details got stolen or their account somehow got invaded, you would be able to protect them and to detect fraudulent behavior at any time. And this is what the topic today is about, really. You're not rejecting any good customers because you pay attention to detail. What I mean by paying attention to detail is things like I call it stupid network intelligence, where, for example, your system wouldn't be able to differentiate between different types of VPN connections. Or you would potentially be using a rule-based legacy rule set or an old rule-based system, which is unable to adapt to a certain situation and therefore very unflexible. So the only way that you can reduce fraud to zero is you limit your traffic to zero. So there are no sales without fraud. However, what you need to do and what you need to make sure of is that you find the right balance. You need to make sure that the experience is frictionless at any point for the customer. You need to make sure that the customer feels safe, again, when using your services. And you need to make sure that in case of a security breach, you do handle things right and you do pay attention at any time to avoiding gaining a bad reputation among customers in order not to lose shoppers in a long time. For this particular scenario, I would like to come up with two cases showcasing this. So first, an example back from 2017, where there was an account takeover attack at PlayStation. I guess you're all familiar with Sony and PlayStation. And back then, customer accounts on the PlayStation Network, which is the online service of PlayStation or Sony for PlayStation players. So online accounts of customers got hacked with simple phishing attacks. So what the hackers did, they got through phishing sites, various phishing attacks, they got the credentials of several customers using email services like Yahoo. And what they found out is that 90% of the people who had Yahoo is just an example in that particular case, but who had a Yahoo email account would use the same email password combination for their PlayStation Network accounts, 90%. So what they did was they logged into the PlayStation Network users account, and they changed the primary device within that account. The primary device is always the device which you first register when you register a console for your PlayStation Network account. And that change of device would not trigger any alert on the customer's side, meaning that the customer would not get informed if the device is being changed within this account, and therefore the customer or the actual owner of the account would not take notice of that. And what this meant was that the only way a customer or a PlayStation Network owner would actually even detect that the account was taken over or that the account was hacked if he or she logged in at the same time as the person who illegally obtained the account would log into a PlayStation Network account. So if you lived in different time zones, potentially you would never even have noticed that your account got hacked and that somebody else was using it. Many years back, obviously Sony has learned from this attack, and it could have been prevented using two-factor authentication. Many years back, Sony has actually had an even worse experience. That was in 2011, where 77 million data sets of customers got stolen through a security attack. And therefore, Sony has taken a lot of measurements in order to improve the situation and to increase the security of customers. But having mentioned, even though they have a two-factor authentication in place today, it is still not always 100% safe. And you see how creative fraudsters can be with that given example. Now, a second example, that is a case that happened just earlier this year, back in August, where the largest, or one of the largest, cashback and loyalty program providers in Germany, that was Payback, an American Express owned company. And basically what happened there was that accounts of customers got hacked. So just to quickly explain the program. Payback is a system where you show your card at the POS, and every time you purchase things at a specific location, you would earn points for these, and those points could then be redeemed in order to get to buy things or to purchase vouchers. And many customer accounts also through phishing attacks got hacked, and the points were basically redeemed, and users, when logging in the next time into their Payback account, they would just see empty accounts. There were a lot of user complaints towards Payback, and the public reaction of Payback was actually saying, yes, we are aware of this, we know that this is happening, but we have enabled two-factor authentication for customers. But if customers are unable to keep their credentials safe, and if they don't manually enable two-factor authentication on their side, even though they were advised to do so, it's not our fault and it's not our problem.
So it's basically pointing the fingers at the customers and said, "Oh, that was you."
Exactly. And I mean, I will get to this point later, but I mean, from a PR point of view, it was not ideal the way they said they formulated it. But I will get back. I will catch up on this on a few slides later. The next slide I would like to is basically just a quote. So in the fourth industrial revolution, the definition of a good experience has changed. Customers demand not only relevant offers, but they want to be truly known and understood as individuals. In the culture of immediacy, they also expect engagement at the exact moment of need. So in this particular case, I'm mainly talking about, or mainly referring to the most powerful consumers right now, which are, according to a latest report of Forbes magazine, are the millennials. So what is the difference between regular buyers and millennials? So especially over the last few years, we have seen a tremendous growth of account-based experience at various e-commerce players. So accounts, obviously, they have a lot of advantages, especially for merchants, but also for customers. It's easier to protect accounts as a merchant, as you would potentially have more details on your customer or user, like a phone number, in order to verify that that a person who is buying something is actually the person owning the account, or you would already have something like two-factor authentication in place, which the customer is already used to, and therefore it would not create any friction on your end. So you're giving a good experience, and the customer knows what to expect on your website. While millennials very much like to shop quickly without necessarily creating an account. And if you do not have a customer using an account, you do potentially not know if you've ever seen this customer before. So the problem here is, when it comes to fraud detection, is you can potentially not see any anomalies in behavior of the customer, because again, you don't know if you've ever seen this customer. So what is the solution there? The solution there is to extract as much data as you can on a particular customer during each user session. And ideally, you would also be able to detect fraudulent behavior in general. So even if you haven't seen the customer, if you don't know if it's a returning customer, you would just see if there is a certain abnormal behavior during the purchasing process, which is not really fitting the average behavior of other customers. Or in the best case scenario, you would be able to create a token for each user in order to identify the user the next time the user comes back to your store. So you would already know the behavior of the user, and you would already have several details about that user stored on your side, the PSP side, whoever it is, or the service provider side that you want to use. So my next slides are really about how not to kill conversion with additional friction. A very, very good example for that is the mentioned during the first presentation already, the PSD2 in Europe. Now I understand there is a very international audience here today, and therefore I didn't want to spend too much time on PSD2 as it mainly concerns Europe, but PSD2 is a very, very good example of how you can actually cause friction for customers or users. So I would just like, for the ones who are maybe not totally familiar with it, but I would just like to read out some of the SCA, so SCA being strong customer authentication requirements, which are coming into place with the Payment Service Directive in Europe, the second Payment Service Directive. So what is basically being asked for on the customer side is that every transaction, or that a transaction below 30 euros would not necessarily have to have a two-factor authentication. But if you have a transaction over 30 euros, it would also not necessarily have to be, sorry, it's so confusing that even I'm confused now what I wanted to say. So basically, for transactions below 30 euros, there is no strong customer authentication. Now, if you see, if a customer does 5 transactions of below 30 euros in a row, the 5th transaction will be, for the 5th transaction, there will be a strong customer authentication requested. So that means that maybe you would go shopping 4 times, and you wouldn't be asked for a second verification step, but the 5th time you would actually be asked for the verification step. Customers would not understand why. The same goes for the fact or the scenario where you would have maybe 4 payments only, and the 4th time you would be requested to have a strong customer authentication, while the first 3 times you wouldn't be, because you have exceeded an overall limit of 3 subsequent payments, gathering up to more than 100 euros. And then, as this is not already complex enough and difficult enough to explain for me, you would also have certain thresholds on a merchant level. So on a merchant level, if you have, you would basically take into consideration the overall chargeback ratio that a merchant has. So if a merchant has a chargeback ratio below 0.13% for transactions below 100 euros, no strong customer authentication would necessarily be enforced by the issuer. The same goes for payments below 250 euros, where the ratio is 0.06%. And then potentially also for payments below 500 euros, if the chargeback ratio is below 0.01%. But now here comes the fun fact. Those are theoretical limits, and the acquiring bank, so meaning the bank who would enable the merchant to accept these payments, can ask for exemptions in those scenarios from the issuer. So basically they can request merchants to be exempted from strong customer authentication if they are below the thresholds, and the issuers can individually decide on whether they want to allow that or not.
So this all goes to the point that we have a lot of complexity here, and simplifying it for the end consumer is a challenge.
Absolutely. And so like by explaining it very complicated, I tried to, of course, did that on purpose, so people get even more confused like I did. But basically what I'm pointing at is that this PSD2, even though it tried to simplify things, it actually made things very complicated and intransparent for customers. And so we can really learn from that.
No, we're going to have to wrap this up in a moment because we're getting
Yes.
ready for the next one. So,
yeah. So just 2 minutes. I'm almost done. No worries. So what do you want to do? In order to avoid such confusion on the customer side, there are 2 things that you can do. So in order to do a 2-factor authentication, you have to have something that a user either owns or that a user is. And this is information that you can actually, that you don't need to necessarily proactively request from the user, but you can actually do it yourself. So you can, for example, get device information on a user's device in order to identify that user, or you could just analyze the behavioral data and therefore tell who the user is or if it is that exact user. And then to wrap it up, as I need to be quick now, what you always want and what you always need to have is the right tools in order to provide fraud analysts with insights on how fraud is basically, or what the fraud patterns on your site look, how fraudsters behave, and how all the things that you detect during user sessions come together and are connected. And it is essential for that to have the right tools in order to be able to identify these patterns, understand these patterns, and then to better fight these patterns. So the key learnings from this are, you should guarantee a frictionless customer experience at any time. You should protect customers from themselves, so don't leave security to users. Rate user sessions individually in order to decrease false positives and reduce the amount of static rule sets that you have on your site. And use the right tools to detect fraud patterns and to gain insight on fraudsters' behavior. And then last but not least, look at Europe and the PSD2 and do it better. So thank you very much. And now it's
Patrick,
time for questions if we still have time.
Yeah, I don't know that we do. Let's see if there's 2 questions. There may be 2 questions here. Let's see. So one of the questions is, isn't it easier to use a card-based cross-border? Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is something different for instant payments. I got it. I'm sorry. This is for a previous one. I think we're good on the questions right now. So I think one thing I can take away from that is just the complexity of making this work well and include and provide seamlessness for the customer. And really, that's just illustrating the challenge for us, I suppose. But I want to thank you, Patrick, very much for taking the time with us today, and thank NetHome for being one of the sponsors of this event. And I appreciate it. We're going to need to move on to the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.